My name is Alara Woodmore, and I turned 19 the night my mother announced she had spent my future like it belonged to her. It started with the smell of butter and garlic and the sound of tape peeling from a grocery store streamer, cheap purple, already curling at the edges. She'd strung it across the archway like a parade ribbon, then opened the drawer where I keep my knives and rummaged as if she'd paid for every fork in this house. She hadn't paid for a single one. My grandfather had signed the deed over to me last year, and sometimes I still touch the title paper the way people touch their wrist when they need a pulse, just to remember what's mine. Festive, Mom said, dropping a crinkled paper crown by my plate. You only turned 19 once. I set the steak down to rest and watched her move through my kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed ownership in front of a mirror. Dad hovered at the island, chewing a toothpick, pretending to read a text. Bethany, hair in a glossy coil, nails like pink glass, propped her phone beside her water and scrolled. From the hallway, a balloon tried to lift and failed. We were halfway through the steaks when Mom smiled at me like a guidance counselor who already decided my destiny. We used your college fund to help with Bethy's wedding, she said kindly, the way you announced dessert. You weren't going next year anyway. Family comes first. The knife in my hand paused, then continued its small arc through the ribeye. The words didn't hit all at once. They arrived in neat little boxes, each one labeled, not mine to say, not yours to take, not tonight. What college fund? I asked. Mom blinked, as if I'd interrupted a script. The one you've been sitting on. The $21,000 your grandfather left. Don't be dramatic, Ilara. I looked at Dad. He cut another bite and didn't look back. Bethany angled her phone for better light on her engagement photo, then tapped a heart on her own face. Even if it existed, I said, you should have asked. I did, Mom said. I'm asking now. Then, with a shrug, and anyway, it's done. The room felt like a stage where I was the only person who could hear the audience groan. I took a breath that tasted like pepper and metal, and I smiled. The smile confused them. Conversation thinned out, then died. That was when the front door opened, and Grandpa Carl and Grandma Linda stepped in with the winter air. Grandpa moved the way storms roll, calm, inevitable. He patted my shoulder, set a small wrapped box by my plate, and sat. Grandma hung up their coats and let her eyes make a quiet inventory. The balloons, the streamers, my face. So, Grandpa said, pouring himself water, how's that $21,000 trust? Still sitting on it, or you figured out where to put it? Mom's fork stopped midair. I met Grandpa's eyes. Something passed between us, agreement in a locked room. I leaned in and whispered 4 words. He nodded once. 5 minutes later, he was on the phone. 30 minutes later, tires crunched in the driveway. Mom tried to manage the moment, like she always does. She stacked plates that didn't need stacking and spoke to the air. We don't need theatrics, it's a family misunderstanding. The money's for a necessary expense. The first officer stepped into the entry, hand resting near his belt, not tense, just awake. The second officer carried a clipboard. Evening, he said. Mr. Woodmore? Grandpa slid a folder across the table like a quiet verdict. Trust documentation, bank statements, signature records. The officer turned a few pages. Paper made a crisp sound that reminded me of winter leaves breaking in your hand. Ma'am, the officer said to my mother, did you authorize a transfer from an account under Ilara Woodmore's name? There was a tremor. You would miss it if you weren't listening for dishonesty. It's our daughter's money, Mom said smoothly, a family asset. We, her parents, are just keeping things within the family. She wasn't using it. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. That account was created for Ilara. Her parents were never granted access. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's an unauthorized withdrawal. Silence pulled the room taut. Bethany finally lifted her eyes from the screen, mouth open like a door she couldn't close. It's not like she earned it, Bethany said, finding her footing in cruelty. She got lucky. Grandpa gave it to her. Grandma's gaze pinned her. And you're planning a wedding with a borrowed dress, a maxed-out card, and now stolen money. Time to learn responsibility. No one dared to look at Grandma for long. The officers explained procedures in a tone they must use on people who don't believe rules apply to them. If funds weren't returned immediately, a formal investigation would open. Potential felony based on the amount. They returned the folder. They left. When the door shut, Mom spun to me, finally choosing a target. You really let it go that far? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Grandpa moved between us. You two are done here, he said to my parents. Hand over the keys. There are moments when an old story snaps. This was the sound of it breaking. Dad reached into his coat and set the spare key on the counter. Mom followed, slow, like handing over a limb. Bethany grabbed her purse without goodbye and left a whirlwind of perfume and resentment behind her. The house exhaled. Grandpa's hand settled on the chair back like a seal. Grandma started clearing plates. Not the performative kind of cleaning my mother does, but the kind that returns a room to itself. I gathered the sagging balloon and dropped it into the trash. It made a thin rubber sigh. In the quiet, my phone lit up in my pocket. Evan. A missed call. A message. Heard they're there. I'm outside if you want me. Also, Leah's been texting weird questions about your trust. I didn't answer. Call me. Leah. Evan's ex. The one who always manages to be close enough to hear the good parts. Far enough to claim innocence. I locked my screen. Grandpa slid a small wrapped box across the table again, reclaiming the reason they had come. Happy birthday, kid, he said. I opened the paper. Inside was a fountain pen. Heavy, simple, a line of weight across my palm. A pen, I said softly. For signing what's yours, Grandpa said. Grandma poured hot water into mugs and added a lemon slice to mine. Steam filled the space between us like a soft curtain. Outside, tires hissed down the street. Inside, the clock over the stove ticked a clean, unbothered rhythm. I didn't touch the money, I said, even though I knew they knew. Grandpa nodded. I know. What now? I asked. Now, Grandpa said, we give them a chance to do the right thing. And if they don't, we show them what the right thing costs. I felt the house around me the way you feel your own heartbeat. Walls that had been mine for a year, finally landing in my bones. Mom's paper crown lay upside down like a cheap, fallen coronet. I picked it up and dropped it into the bin with the balloon. Grandma's voice was soft. Eat before it gets cold. So we did. We ate what was left of the steak. We drank hot water with lemon. We let the night gather its corners. When Grandpa and Grandma were ready to leave, I walked them to the door. At the threshold, Grandpa paused. Tomorrow you'll get an email, he said. Read it. Then come to dinner. 7 o'clock. Just you. I nodded. They stepped out into the early winter dark. The porch light made a small gold circle on the steps. I shut the door and leaned my back against it, listening to the house breathe. In the hallway drawer, the one that sticks, I found a tangle of broken chargers, dead pens, and coupons that had expired 3 seasons ago. I wasn't looking for anything, not yet. I only wanted the quiet action of tidying my life. A slip of white appeared under the mess, my name in neat, bold handwriting. No postage. I held the envelope a long time before I opened it. The email arrived at 6:11 a.m., exactly the kind of hour when your life decides whether to become heavier or clearer. Subject line, adjustment to family trust, disbursements. The sender was someone I'd never met, Carla D., family accounts, and her message was clipped, professional, and mercilessly precise. Effective immediately, all non-essential distributions from the family trust were frozen. A new financial advisor would be assigned exclusively to me by end of week. There was a PDF attachment I didn't open right away. I read the email 3 times, then closed my laptop and stared at the steam rising from my mug like it might write the next step on the air. Outside, Michigan was winter gray and undecided. I washed last night's plates because my hands needed a task my heart didn't. When the hallway drawer stuck, like it always does, I tugged harder. Junk sighed forward. Dead pens, busted chargers, gum that had fossilized in its foil. That's when I saw the envelope with my name in Grandpa's tidy black ink. Elara. No stamp, no return address, as if the house itself had delivered it while I slept. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down like people do when the doctor asks them to. Inside were 2 pages, unlined, with words that didn't waste corners. If you found this on your own, you're smarter than I thought, and I already thought you were the smartest in this family. I swallowed. The trust was a test. What's buried deeper is yours too if you prove you're nothing like them. Check under the desk, bottom drawer. You'll know what to do. I read the letter through, then again, then traced the margin with my thumb like the paper could answer questions the sentences politely refused. The clock's tick grew loud enough to count. I left the table, crossed the hall to Grandpa's old office, sunstripe across the floorboards, dust like quiet snow, and knelt at the big oak desk. Bottom drawer out, palm flat to the underside. My fingers found tape. A small black flash drive came free into my hand, light and cold as a secret. On my laptop, the drive blinked its tiny red eye and asked for a password I didn't have. I stared at the prompt until the cursor's pulse began to feel like mine. Then I texted Grandpa 2 words. Found it. A bubble appeared right away. Dinner. 7:00, just you. Another bubble followed, like he'd felt my next question happen. Bring the drive. I stood in the quiet house and realized I didn't want to carry this alone, not for the next 10 hours. I called Evan. He answered like he'd been waiting with the phone in his hand. Are you okay? He said. I'm processing. I'm on my way. You don't have to. I'm already halfway there. When he came in, he didn't try to fix the room with words. He just put his palm over the back of my neck and breathed with me until my lungs remembered the choreography. I told him about the email, the letter, the drive, the password box that blinked like a dare. He leaned on the island, jaw set in that way that means he's thinking in layers. We'll open it with your grandfather, he said, on his turf. I nodded. Leah texted you? He winced. She asked if you were really pressing charges over family drama. I told her it wasn't her business. I also told her to stop messaging me. Did she? After a few screenshots of gossip I didn't read. He met my eyes. I'm with you. I believed him. People say I'm with you like a tagline. Evan says it like a promise, and then he keeps it. He stayed through lunch, through a half-hearted attempt at soup, through my pacing that left ghost paths in the kitchen. When 6:30 came, he walked me to my car and kissed my forehead like he was setting a seal there. At 7, he said, you'll get answers. After that, we choose our fight. Grandpa's house smelled like orange peel and old books. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a bottle of scotch standing sentry beside it. He didn't pour. He watched me cross the threshold the way fishermen watch a line go taut. You found it, he said. I set the drive between us. You left me a trail. Had to be sure you'd follow it on your own feet. He slid the drive into his laptop and typed a password so fast I barely caught the shape of it. 4 numbers that meant something to him and, apparently, to me. The screen bloomed into a simple grid of folders. 2006, 2009, 2014, transfers, signatures, voicemails. The tidy architecture of a man who keeps everything and throws away nothing that matters. You recorded them? I asked, not sure if I meant my parents or time itself. I archived the truth, he said, because one day you'd need it, and truth has a way of disappearing when people decide it should. He opened 2006. We listened. My mother's voice spilled out of the tinny speakers, slurred edge, brittle rage, a wind-up toy of old grievance. He always liked that kid more. I'm his daughter. That house should have been mine. The money should have been mine. It went on. It didn't get prettier. I watched the waveform jitter and rise, a seismograph of a person who'd been shaking for years. Grandpa clicked signatures next. High-resolution scans appeared, 2 neat columns like a duel. On the left, my name in the careful loops I used in high school. On the right, my name again, but it wasn't my hand, not even an imitation. It was a costume. Bank's forensic team certified that as forgery, Grandpa said. Dated a year ago. She must have thought she could get ahead of the paperwork. My throat went tight. She planned it for that long. Longer, he said, and opened transfers. Lines and amounts. Arrows from places that were supposed to be safe to places that smiled back like empty rooms. Your mother and father treat anything within reach as theirs. Bethany learned the same lesson. It's not about need, it's about entitlement. The word fit too perfectly. It clicked into the story's empty socket and made everything else stop rattling. I stared at the monitor and realized I had my fingers curled into fists in my lap. I uncurled them and found crescents my nails had left in the soft of my skin. They hurt. Good. I needed something my body could understand. Grandpa closed the laptop. He folded his hands and looked at me like a judge who doesn't hate his job. The trust was a test, like I said in the letter. Some of them failed it on day 1. You didn't. Now there's more, if you want more. Real estate, stock options, private accounts, and a cabin in Vermont that smells like cedar and quiet, all in your name. But we don't get to it by being nice. Court, I said. Court, he said. Civil, criminal, fraud, theft, possibly perjury. We freeze what they touch. We stop the wedding funds. We let the banks and the law do the part I can't. Once you start, you don't pull back. It gets public. It gets ugly. It gets permanent. He let the permanence land and sit between us like a third chair. I can't promise you they'll change, he added. I can promise you they'll stop pretending you're a wallet that grew legs. I thought of Bethany in my dining room, liking her own face while my future got carved up on a plate. I thought of Dad chewing through truth like it was gristle. I thought of Mom opening drawers she hadn't bought, announcing generosity with stolen cash, calling it love. I also thought of Evan in my kitchen, steady as a post, and of Leah hovering around us like static, ready to spark the worst version of every rumor. I thought of my house finally breathing last night when the door shut behind the people who claimed it. I thought of the fountain pen in my pocket like a small, serious promise. When do we file? I asked. Grandpa smiled, but only with his eyes. We already started. Mr. Lawson has drafts ready, the civil case, the theft report, and an emergency injunction to freeze any vendor your sister paid with your trust. You give me the word, and by morning the gears are turning loud enough for them to hear in their sleep. What do you need from me? Resolve, he said. Then, softer, and your signature. He pushed a slim folder toward me. On top was a letter of engagement from Lawson and Cade. Clean fonts, heavy paper. It didn't care about my heartbeat. The last page had a blank line that waited for my name like a held breath. I took out the fountain pen he gave me and felt its weight settle home in my fingers. If I sign, I said, we don't go back. He nodded once. We go forward the way truth goes forward. I signed. The ink laid itself down with the confidence I wished I already had. Grandpa turned the paper, added his name, and set it aside like a stone in a foundation. He didn't pour the scotch. He poured water. He lifted his glass, to choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. We touched rims. The water tasted like clean metal and something older. When I stepped out into the night, the snow had finally started. Thin, insistent, the kind that looks like ash under streetlights. I sat in my car and texted Evan. Signed. He replied before the dots could think about becoming words. Proud of you. I'm here when you get home. I started the engine. A thought moved through me like a quiet train. I wasn't just defending what was mine. I was defining who I would be in the rooms where my family had taught me to be small. Halfway home, my phone buzzed on the seat. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened at a red light. Leah's voice poured out, sweetened with the kind of sugar that cracks your teeth. Hey, Alara, just wanted to say, if you need advice on public perception, I know a few people who could help shape the story. Be a shame if the wrong version got out first. I deleted the message and felt the clarity snap back into place. We choose our fight. We choose our circle. At the next light, I blocked her number. When I reached my street, the snow was committing. I parked, stepped out, and lifted my face into it. It pinpricked my cheeks awake. Inside, the house greeted me without a single demand. I took the pen from my pocket and set it on the hall table. A small thing. A start. In the quiet, the future sounded like paper being arranged. Neat stacks, fresh edges, a story finally refusing to be told by other people's hands. By the time Monday came, the snow outside had turned to glassy slush, and the air carried that strange silence that follows the start of a storm. I was back at Grandpa's office, this time with Mr. Lawson, the family attorney who looked like he'd walked out of a courtroom commercial. Silver hair, pinstriped suit, voice like gravel and precision. He greeted me with a nod that said everything without needing words. Miss Woodmore, he began, sliding a folder across the table, will be proceeding with 3 filings: civil suit, fraud, and misappropriation of protected funds. The amount makes this a felony case if it proceeds to criminal court. I tried to breathe evenly, but the words hung in the air like weights. Grandpa leaned back, calm, patient, hands folded over his cane. Tell her about the injunction, he said. Lawson adjusted his glasses. An emergency injunction will freeze any accounts connected to your trust. That includes your sister's wedding deposits, venue, catering, dress, florist. All assets paid for with your funds are now under investigation. Until the court determines ownership, they're considered frozen. I blinked. You can actually stop the wedding? Lawson nodded. If your money paid for it, yes. The realization hit me harder than I expected. Not because I wanted the wedding to continue, but because I suddenly saw how public all this was going to become, how loud it would be. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, mostly unknown numbers. By the third ring from one marked Mark, Bethany's fiance, I picked up. He didn't even say hello. Alara, what the hell did you do? I stayed quiet, letting him talk. The venue just called, payment bounced, the florist canceled, the DJ dropped us. His breath was ragged. Bethany's losing it. She said you went behind everyone's back. You ruined the whole thing. I almost laughed at the irony. I didn't ruin anything, Mark. I just took back what was mine. He went silent, then tried another angle. Your mom told me your grandpa offered to pay for everything, said the money was tied up in some account with your name on it, and you were being difficult. She said we could fix it later. So that was the story they'd spun. I almost admired the consistency. Talk to Grandpa's lawyer, I said, and hung up. 30 minutes later, Grandpa arrived at my door carrying a wooden box under his arm. He didn't even knock, just walked in with the certainty of someone who still owned every room he entered. Got something for you, he said, setting the box down on the coffee table. Inside were old family photographs. Mom as a teenager, Bethany as a baby, me with missing teeth and crooked bangs, Grandpa and Grandma standing behind us, like guardians of a kingdom that no longer existed. This family used to mean something, he said softly, but not anymore, not to them. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a revised copy of his will. Every asset, his home, his savings, the Vermont cabin, even the remaining family trust, now listed me as the sole beneficiary. I stared at it. You didn't have to do this. I did, he said, because they needed to learn, and because you needed to see what justice looks like when it finally grows teeth. Then he pulled out one more document, a police report. I recognized the license plate number before I even finished reading. It was my mother's car, the one she flaunted like a crown, the one she claimed she'd bought with her own savings. She's been driving my property for 6 years, Grandpa said. Registered under my name. I let her keep it because I still believed she might change. He took a slow sip of his drink. Now I've reported it stolen. My heart jumped. You're serious. He nodded once. Not even 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Bethany. Her messages came rapid fire. What did you do? Mom's outside screaming. There's a tow truck in the driveway. You went too far. I set the phone down and looked out my window. Snow kept falling, calm and indifferent. No, I whispered to no one. We finally went far enough. The next afternoon, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I'd gotten used to chaos. Silence felt suspicious. Then came the knock. When I opened the door, Bethany stood there. No makeup, eyes swollen, her perfect curls wilted into limp waves. She looked human for once. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't answer, just stepped aside. She walked in carefully, scanning the walls like she expected to find hidden cameras. Mom's not doing well, she began. She's been crying for 2 days straight. Dad doesn't know what to do. I leaned against the counter. You're not here because you care about Mom's tears. What do you want? Her voice trembled, half genuine, half performance. They're saying Grandpa's lost it, that he's manipulating you, that this isn't you. I raised an eyebrow. So, that's the new story. She hesitated, then sighed. Look, maybe we messed up, okay? Maybe we should have talked to you first. But it's done. We can fix this. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder, setting it gently on the coffee table like it might explode. If you drop the lawsuit, we'll transfer the money back, all of it. I'll cancel the wedding. We just want things to go back to normal. I looked at her for a long time, then opened the folder. The top page was an official settlement agreement. I scanned it, and my chest went cold. The signature on the last page wasn't hers. It was mine. Only, it wasn't. It was a forged version of my signature, the same looping mistake as the bank document Grandpa had shown me. They were trying to trick me into agreeing to something I'd never signed. Again. I took a photo of the page with my phone. You should leave, I said. Alara, please. Now. Her eyes filled with something that might have been guilt or rage or both. She grabbed the folder and stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard the picture frames rattled. That night, I showed the photo to Grandpa. He said nothing for a long time, then made one call. Within the hour, Lawson emailed an updated draft of the case, forgery added as a new criminal charge. This just went from financial to felony, Grandpa said quietly. I nodded. Good. Before I went to bed, my phone buzzed again. A text from Evan. Leah's been posting cryptic stuff online, something about families that eat their own. Want me to handle it? I stared at the message, then typed back. No, let her talk. The truth will be louder. The world outside had turned blue-black, a thin shimmer of frost on the glass. I watched it form as if my life were being rewritten one frozen line at a time. I didn't know what the next chapter would bring. I just knew I wasn't afraid of it anymore. Thursday arrived with the kind of sky that looked tired of pretending to be winter. I was halfway through a reheated sandwich when Grandpa called. "Well," he said in that calm tone that always meant something big, "it started." I paused. "What started?" "The foreclosure." For a moment I couldn't speak. Foreclosure? On what? He explained it with the same steady patience he used to teach me chess when I was a kid. Years ago, he'd co-signed a second mortgage for my parents when they promised to flip a house. They never finished the renovation, never even paid the interest. Grandpa had been covering the minimums to protect his credit, until now. "I pulled my name," he said. "Stop the payments. The bank's already notified them." I swallowed hard. How long before they lose it? 60 days, he said. Maybe less. And when the bank calls, they'll realize they're on their own. He let that settle before adding, "They don't know yet, but they will, at the family barbecue next Saturday." I blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. Melanie's hosting. Everyone will be there. It's time they all learn who's been carrying the weight." I didn't argue. There was no point. Grandpa didn't plan things halfway. When Saturday came, the sky cleared as if for the occasion. Aunt Melanie's place was 40 minutes out of the city, a big yard, picnic tables covered in red-checked cloth, smoke curling from 2 grills. At first glance, it looked like every other family gathering, laughter floating through the air like nothing had happened. I stayed near the edge, plate untouched, watching. Bethany was there, pretending everything was normal, clinging to Mark's arm like she could keep her world from collapsing through sheer grip strength. Mom and Dad arrived late, sunglasses on, smiles too wide. Dad hovered behind her, trying for casual but failing miserably. And then Grandpa pulled up. He didn't bother with subtlety. Parked his old truck on the lawn like a throne, stepped out in his worn leather jacket, and headed straight for the main table with a box tucked under his arm. Conversations died mid-sentence as he walked past. "Got something to share before we dig into the ribs," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. People chuckled nervously. He opened the box and began handing out manila envelopes one by one. I already knew what was inside. Statements, legal notices, copies of the trust, the forgery, the car report, the foreclosure papers, everything. Mom's face went white before she even reached the last page. Dad flipped through his copy, muttered something under his breath, then walked toward the fence like maybe he could leave the truth behind if he moved fast enough. Bethany didn't open hers at all, just crushed the envelope in her fist and stared at me. Grandpa's voice carried across the yard. "This family," he said, "has forgotten what accountability looks like." He turned to me. "Ilara hasn't." I felt every eye land on me. My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. "She's the only one who never asked for anything," Grandpa continued. "That's why she gets everything." The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Then Grandpa said the line that would echo in my head for years. "Next time you decide to steal from your own blood, make sure they're not the one holding the receipts." He set the last envelope down, turned, and walked back to his truck. He didn't wait for applause or reaction. He just started the engine, waved to Aunt Melanie, and drove away like he'd just dropped off a delivery and was done for the day. No one moved for a full minute. The sound of the engine faded down the road, replaced by murmurs, the clatter of a fork hitting a plate. Then people started leaving, in waves. By the time the sun began to dip, half the yard was empty. Mom sat rigid at the table, clutching her wine glass. Bethany was crying quietly into Mark's shoulder, whispering something I couldn't hear. Dad stood apart, staring at the ground. I stayed behind to help Aunt Melanie clean up. She didn't say much, just handed me a bag of leftovers and smiled faintly. "About time someone called them out," she said. Driving home, the light turned that soft gold that always made me feel suspended between endings and beginnings. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Voicemails, texts, missed calls. I didn't open any of them. I already knew what they'd say. Mom begging for another chance. Dad asking if there was any way to fix this. Bethany's final message. "Congratulations. Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply. When I reached my driveway, I sat in the car for a long moment, just watching the house. The porch light had clicked on automatically, casting a gentle glow across the steps. Inside, everything was still. This house had seen shouting, betrayal, police lights reflected on the walls. Tonight, it saw none of that. Just peace. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots, and climbed the porch. From here, I could see the outline of the woods behind the property, the place Grandpa used to take me when I was little, where he'd tell me that truth, like a tree, only grows if you stop cutting it down to make room for lies. I sat on the steps, wrapped my arms around my knees, and watched the last light fade. My phone buzzed again. Evan this time. Thinking of you, proud of you. Dinner tomorrow? I smiled. Dinner, 7 o'clock, just us. For the first time in a long time, that promise didn't sound like a battle plan. It sounded like peace. The air was crisp, the sky painted in slow, forgiving colors. Somewhere far away, I imagined Grandpa raising a glass of water to the night, knowing exactly what kind of woman he'd help shape, one who would never again let silence disguise betrayal. And as I sat there, the quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine.